Hello, my name is Fritz Kao, and welcome to my YouTube show, Factual Conspiracies. Special guest host, Raven Brooks. It's the second episode, MEL's Hole, and various other topics discussed.
Hello.
Hello, Raven. How are you doing tonight?
Doing good. How you doing, Fritz?
Hey, man, welcome back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a little bit. How you feeling?
Feeling good. Me and the boy back out of the hospital and back in the saddle, ready to ride off into the sunset and hallelujah and whatnot.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear, man. You had touch and go there for a little while.
Well, tonight's video discussion will be about Mel's Hole, and maybe later on, if we have time, we can touch into underground creatures and various different other subjects that reflect the same topic. Mel's Hole is actually a very interesting subject. In 1997, on Art Bell's show, a viewer called in by the name of Mel Waters, and he brought up this whole topic of this bottomless hole he had in his backyard that supposedly since the 1950s various different people in the communities, and this is in Washington.
Yeah, Ellensburg, Washington. It's actually Monastash. It's like a couple miles outside of Ellensburg West, and some friends of mine, family actually has some cabins up around there. So this is something that's been going on, since as long as I can remember. I've been in and out of Ellensburg, since mid '80s.
And we're lucky
And
to have you, Raven, because you actually have some background information being from the area. Feel free to tell us a lot that you know about Mel's Hole for people who aren't familiar.
Yeah, well, my wife is actually from that town, and that's where we met. And we both worked for the county there and fairgrounds and the courthouse, and over the years, I've heard lots of stories and actually met people that would go out there and throw their trash and old couches and refrigerators. I'm talking about all the time. I mean, just a whole group of people that lived up there wouldn't even go to the dump. They'd just take their stuff over and throw it in this hole. And it was talked about a lot. A lot of people considered it, kind of a local legend. But the people that live up there, like some of the people that live there since the town was founded, their families go back. I mean, they got streets named after them. One of them would be, let's see, I can't remember right off the top of my head.
Well, just a little background into Mel's Hole is that he originally called into Art Bell's show in 1997. And then within a few days later, correct me if I'm wrong here, Raven, within a few days later, he called back into Art Bell's show and had basically stated that government agencies had shut down his property and denied him access to the hole.
Well, the way I heard it was, he just wanted to jump on and, basically he was looking for the Guinness Book of World Records. He was going to, see about, having the deepest hole because, he ran a whole bunch of line down there. That was his initial reason for calling. I mean, he sent a fax to Art Bell, I believe, and to let him know about he's got the deepest hole he thinks he's ever, he's put out a whole bunch of spools. Like, I mean, we're talking, I think it was equivalent of over 7 miles of line in this ground, and he wanted, and initially what he was trying to do was, get notoriety of having the deepest hole ever, so that was what the whole thing was about, him contacting at first,
And that was the
and then,
controversy, I believe, is at the end of it, he actually had so many spools down that he had almost 18 miles worth, and people weren't sure with his 1 pound weight if, well, I mean, it's a fact that much fishing line, 18 miles worth is going to weigh enough that you couldn't tell if it bottomed out and just the whole weight of the line. You get what I'm saying?
yeah, well, physics is, if it happened to catch up on something down there, your line is still going to be once it reaches the pound weight, you're not going to be able to tell whether it's still going down there or not. You'd have to pull it back up and to see, I mean, apparently he lowered some lifesavers way down there, and they never came up wet, so they didn't hit water. But here's the thing:
And that's an old fisherman's
regardless
trick.
regardless whether or not the line went straight down from the center, because I think it was like 3 foot by 3 foot hole, or 4 foot or something, and people have been throwing things in there for 30 or 40 years, and I'm talking about refrigerators, carcasses, just trash. I mean, at some point you would think something would get, if it had it would fill up
Oh
at
yeah,
some
the
point.
stories go on and on. There was a dog that after it was deceased was put to rest in the hole, and it was seen and it came back to life in the local woods surrounding the town.
Yeah, that was somebody's account. That was Mel Waters said it was somebody that told him that. So, but
It's an interesting
that
story.
happened before his time, I believe. But
Also, cows, carcasses of cows had been put down there. There was a gentleman that has dumped thousands of recycled tires down the hole. You would think at
oh yeah,
some point it would fill up if it wasn't
and they
bottomless.
yeah they even discussed uh, making a deal with the local dump, to come and dump stuff down there, instead of using the compost area, and there was a whole bunch of. I mean, it was just one of those local things that people just. It was always there. That as far as they always knew, and it was one of those things. Hey, can I dump stuff in the hole? Sure. And they would go out there and dump stuff in that hole, and they'd never hear anything hit bottom. They just hear it scrape along the side. They would go down, and then nothing.
Now I
You
made
couldn't
a
even hear an echo out of there. You couldn't, you as many times as you could, and I've heard this from different people. Panatone, that was one of the names of the people that lived there. Their family's been there a long time. The Clairfs. There's a bunch of people my wife went to school with that were from actually that area, like 2 or 3 houses over from Mel's Waters property. And people would drive out there, and apparently dump stuff in that hole. Now, people nowadays, there is a military presence there, several years ago, and you just can't get to it. People don't know how to get there. If you even look on Google Maps, you can see in that area. You can see a whiteout. It's a big whiteout in the area. It's huge. It's probably, I don't know, maybe 10 square miles or something, right over where the hole was supposed to be. So, I mean, that tells you something if they black something out. It's obvious they don't want people to know a location of something or see anything up close with Google Maps or whatever other geological program that's out there.
And even when I watched a short news snippet on Mel's Hold, a local news station from Washington, the state of Washington, they commented and they talked to the local librarian who did at that particular library have a file on Mel's Hold that actually had disappeared around the same time too. It was interesting.
Yep.
And
Yeah, that's a fact. That is a fact. I mean, obviously, excuse me. I'm not sure if that gentleman. I think that gentleman is still there. Record keeper, the guy in the back
a
that
lot of
does all that
interesting stories
archive.
surrounding Mel Waters. He also said that he dug up a gun that he had traded to a landlord for rent. That later on he was informed by the landlord that when he placed the gun by TVs or radios, he would receive different stations from either the past or the future, and that's really interesting. And the last I knew, Mel was trying to get in touch with that gentleman who had actually disappeared, quote unquote, from Mel Waters'
Mm-hmm.
radio show interview from Art Bell, and hasn't been seen by his family in some odd amount of time.
Yeah, that story gets really wild after the fact. All the way up to the point. Now we all knew that there was some type of military presence there for some reason. We knew that much. We knew that people. What I can tell you for a fact is there's a lot of people there that threw stuff in that hole for 30, 40 years, as long as people can remember. And also, that there was the property up there was there's some type of military uh, thing going on with that property. We know those things for a fact. Okay, now when Mel Waters, after the first interview with Art Bell, all the way up to the point to where he said, yeah, the military took his property because of some septic tank thing, and they just basically pulled it out from under him. But apparently they were paying him rent, to do work on that, to do whatever it was they're doing with that hole. So at some point you
two
got to
hundred
realize
and
that there's something definitely to it.
$225,000 a month is what he quoted
Oh
on
yeah,
Art
you would
Bell
think
show.
he wouldn't be broke right now, huh? Or how the story ended up being.
Well, how the story went was with the money he went to Australia and
Yeah, and open some wombat or
wombats, yes,
yeah, something to do with it just seemed kind of odd,
and wild.
Yeah, you know what? It got crazy. In my opinion, all the point all the way up to where he got lost his property, and that everything's plausible up to the point where he came back.
I was very
And
interested, yes, myself indeed, when and I was very captive with Mel's story, and it just seemed too convenient that he was able to do for a second time what no one that, to my knowledge, has been able to do is find a never-ending hole like the one such as Mel's hole, and he was able to find an even cooler hole and lesser known and lesser accessible hole on quote unquote government lands with a metal ring this time, which, according to
yeah, and
him,
it
looked
was
like
warm
some.
to the touch. Yet it gave off some type of some type of emanation, electric, some warm emanation from it. And then it got really crazy after that. It kind of makes you wonder whether or not somebody got to him and said, "Look, you already gave up too much about this. You're going to need to make it crazy. The rest of this story needs to be, it needs to be so ridiculous that people are just going to debunk the whole thing." But I can honestly tell you there is a hole there, all the way up to the military problem, with him losing his property, and people did throw stuff in that hole for at least 40 years minimum.
In Washington,
So
not the
in
whole,
Washington,
not
yeah,
the
right
whole
outside of
what the
Ellensburg, there's a
bass.
little unincorporated town, Menashtash. We go out there. Like I said, their families got cabins up there. Going up to the woods. There's a park out there. Fishing, camping, hiking. But you drive through. We come outside of Ellensburg. You're going west up Menashtash Ridge, and you pass Mel's property going up that way. And back off the back of his property, or what, I don't believe that. I'm not sure where it was, on his property. I'm not sure how big the property was. I don't know if it was a piece of land farther back. That was I'm not sure how that was. We just know that the people that lived around there would take stuff out it was on his property, and I wouldn't even know where the location was. But you can pretty much guess if you look at the Google Maps in that area, you'll see a white square that's blocked out, and that's the area it's at.
It's one of the number
And
one. It's one of the number 10 images, I believe, when you type Mel's hole and then you hit Google Images in your Google search engine.
yeah, but you can also just punch in the town, just punch in Ellensburg, Washington, and then you go west of there, and you'll see it. You'll see the big white square that they erased out that area, so you can't zoom in and see anything. So there's something out there. I mean, but at this point, I think it's under the control of the government or military.
You never know. That hole might have been actually covered, maybe even 1,000 feet down and buried to where it would never be found again. Even
Or they have some sort of uh,
people have
facility over the top of it, so they can do
people
research.
have
I mean, that's what I would think they would do.
people have conducted searches. Not necessarily reputable explorers, extraordinaires, whatnot, but local people have conducted searches for the hole again and have not been able to locate it.
You know why? Because there's property that you can't get to out there because it's owned by the military or owned by the government. There's no trespassing signs out there. there's fence. There is areas out there where they supposedly conduct military drills, or there's some problem. There was something I heard about a environmental something to do with the environment. The Environmental Protection
Now,
Agency
you
or
know,
something to that
Raven, one
effect.
of the largest U.S. military bases, which is involved with training of soldiers, is actually right, like within an hour's distance, half an hour's distance from there.
Yeah, that's like towards Yakima.
Yeah, now they trained a lot
Yakima's
of the
about 30 miles from
soldiers.
Owensburg, about
They
35
trained a
miles.
lot of the soldiers for the Iraq War and various other engagements. And I mean,
Hmm.
there's lots of soldiers in and out of that area, actually.
Yeah, there's a military firing range out there at training grounds, and you could hear the explosions. I was there when they did training out there all the time, and you could hear them just driving. I drive through Yakima all the time from Owensburg, and you could hear the explosions. And they did it at night, during the day. I mean, you hear some points, you know, month long. And they were some pretty good ordnance out there, some pretty loud stuff. You know, and but see the area, west of Ellensburg, I'm talking about, is a small community. It's basically when you drive out of Ellensburg through Menastas, it's almost like you're just driving in the rural area of Ellensburg. You don't even see, you don't even really notice that you're going into another unincorporated town. It just
Now,
seems like a long country road outside Ellensburg that's got all these houses. The other side of Ellensburg, Kittitas County. It's Kittitas County, and there's a little town called Kittitas. It's east. It's about a 10-mile drive that
correct
way, and there's
me
been some pretty weird stuff going on in that
correct
area
me
as
if
well.
I'm wrong, Raven, but that same area of Washington is known for a large amount of Bigfoot sightings.
Oh yeah, well you're talking to Cascades, and Wenatchee, the Wenatchee Forest. I used to live in Wenatchee too, man. There's a plethora of sightings, UFO sightings, Bigfoot sightings, missing people.
And then again, yes, yes,
Right
yes.
there in Kittitas, outside of Ellensburg, there was an account of a missing person from David. Actually, David Politis did a. There was a story that he did out of there, right off of Badger Pocket. I used to live right off Badger Pocket on Commozy Lane. If you look it up, there's a Commozy Road, Commoz or
Wild,
Commmozy,
wild, Raven, and even
and I lived
probably
right on the beginning of Badger Pocket. That was when I lived all over Ellensburg, Kittitas, that area.
probably
But
what's
I didn't know anything about that until I listened to one of his programs. And
more
yeah, they
interesting
found.
is, isn't there
Go
one
ahead.
or two or even three clusters in that area documented by David Pletties from his Missing 411
Yeah,
series?
I know. There's one for sure in Kittitas. It's in the right outside. It's in Kittitas County, right outside of Kittitas City, and it's a really tiny town. It's got one little tiny store, one gas station, a couple of bars, and you go about 4 miles east of Kittitas, and you come to Stevens Road. There's Cliff Road. Cliff, that's another one of the family that's lived there. Lived in that area, forever, generations. And you take a ride over this bridge, and there's a road called Commozy Road. It's Commozzy. That's how you pronounce it. I lived right the first property. It's a little farm. It's a little horse farm there. And that when you look out the back door of that house, you see a road that goes up around the hill, and that's Badger Pocket. And so there's several small, good sized, farms, and there's a couple industrial a lot of hay going on around there. There's Timothy hay. They grow Timothy hay out there. There's storage facilities out there, but there's a lot of farms out that way, and that's where one of the children were missing, and all of a sudden ended up miles away. Found him on a tree or underneath a tree or something, and that was one of David Pilotti's radio programs where I was listening to it. It kind of tripped me out because I lived right there. I mean, I'm telling you, I could walk up that hill. It's about a 4 mile walk up the hill around Badger Pocket, and you can go all the way back around and come back into Kittitas or hit the freeway to go back into Ellensburg. So yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff going around there.
Yeah, the closest David Pletty's Missing 411 disappearance that we have here was actually the little girl from Paris, Michigan. But then again, there's also more recently was the local football hero whose name escapes me currently. I'm ashamed to admit, but I believe he disappeared in Baldwin, Michigan, which is close to the
Was that a
woods.
recent case?
Yes, within the last year or so.
Oh, you mean where they pinged his phone and right?
Yeah, and his actual GPS coordinates based upon what they pinged were giving off three different locations that it wasn't possible for him to be at in the amount of
Like
time.
he was moving super fast.
If it was possible, he would have to be transported by something. He couldn't have done
Yeah,
what
and
was being
the
done
other
on
thing
foot.
was he couldn't have been lost because there was a road. He would have had to pass a road. I remember that much.
Yes, to where there's no way you could be lost in the woods if you're passing a road several times based upon the coordinates that were being pinged.
Exactly, and he did mention as he when he made the call that somebody was following him.
Now there is a
And,
possibility that the coordinates were. We all like to depend on technology 100%, but sometimes there are flaws. Sometimes there are mistakes. It is
oh, absolutely.
possible that
Yeah.
that could have been a fluke. You know,
Well, and there's also you got those mock location apps too. You know, you could really
but it
screw
is
stuff up with that.
possible that that was not a fluke and it was accurate, and something somehow he was making it to these locations. Somehow being transported there.
Yeah, at this point we'll never know, but they did find him. When they found him, he was expired. You know.
We will know if we go. Well, not for sure, but it is possible. You know what I mean? Especially if we think the weather plays a key. David Pletties is always talking about that. If we go to these same locations at the same types of years, it is possible that maybe one of these occurrences could repeat itself. And because that is the scenario, they do repeat themselves in
Yeah.
these locations.
You know, I lived all over Eastern Washington, and all the way. I was raised in Seattle, born in Yakima, and I was raised in Seattle, back and forth to Ellensburg, Wenatchee, Moses Lake, Cle Elum. These are all, Eastern Washington is more. There's, uh, Central Washington University. That's where my wife went to school, and it's a college town. But you go a little farther. Uh, Moses Lake was one place that I do recall a lot of sightings the time I lived there with my grandmother. Bigfoots, and there was an area up over this mountain in the back of our house, or the front of our house actually. You walk out the door and there's houses across the street, but behind those houses was I mean, actual mountains going straight. You'd have to really huff and puff to get up the hill. We'd ride down in the snow on sleds, during the winter. But you get up over that hill, one mountain, you go down the other side, and there's a place that they used to call uh, the I can't remember the path to hell. It was something that path to hell, and I don't know. It's been one of those things that the locals had called it that for they don't know. Just like these David Pilates when he brings up the Devil's Butte, Devil's Peak, Satan's Hollow, and all these things, and I do recall saying that there's a lot of people that went
The
down this. It was
reoccurring
almost like a hollow.
the
It
reoccurring
was almost
devil themed park names like Devil's Canyon, Devil's
Yeah,
Peak.
exactly. And that is weird because nobody could ever tell. And I remember asking, well, why is it called that? And people said, just don't go down in there because it looked like these woods went farther down into the valley down there, and there was nothing there. But it looked like a big the trail. It wasn't really a trail. It looked like it was a game trail maybe, but it went down the trees the way they bent in, and the bushes looked like a tunnel, and it went down as far as you could see. And there's been lots of accounts that people said people went down in there and never came back. And they've had search parties and out there, and just a bunch of stuff was going on back. God, that was back in 78, 79, and there was a lot of stuff going on around that time. And nobody could ever tell me, even to this day, why it's called Devil's Devil's Hole or whatever. Devil's, I believe it was Devil's Path or the Path to Hell or Devil's Path to Hell or something like that.
Yeah, there's so many. Like I actually have his book, The Devil in the Details, by David Pletties, and just in his opening, the cover sleeve, there's I don't know, maybe it's 100 or so different names of devil, Devil's Canyon, Devil's Peak, Devil's Pack, Devil's Lookout, so
Yeah,
on
you
and
think
so
you
forth.
think
It
you'd be able
goes
to
on and on
to
over
trip.
and over.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that it's Devil's Peak, Devil's Lookout, Devil's Path. It goes on and on. And
No,
when you start putting
and
them together and
just
reading them
like what he
all,
says. I mean, there's got to be a reason. I mean, when you say devil, when you say Satan, of course it doesn't. It's got to be something that's not good. You know. Um, I don't know if you've heard if you ever heard of the Oahe River up in Oregon, and this is up outside of Ontario, Oregon, Nissa, Idaho, and they have. I used to do geological survey up there. I worked for a company out of Canada,
very
Pacific
interesting.
Geophysical.
No, I'm not familiar with the area. Go on.
Well, you go outside of Ontario, Oregon, which if you go 300 miles south of Washington, you'll go through Eugene, Oregon, and then you'll right on the border of Idaho is a little town called Ontario. Now, if you go west of Ontario, you'll come to a little town called Nissa, and you go about another 30 miles or so, 15 to 30 miles. You come to these hot springs that are going up to this lake. It's like a resort. They got motels up there. There's a lake that everybody goes to. Well, on the way up there, there's these natural hot springs. One's like on the side of the river where you can sit in it, and the river, it's really hot water, so you can sit in that and
Sounds
bathe in
like
this
a nice
natural hot.
vacation getaway.
Yeah, well, the water kind of runs into it, so you can sit and you can get cold water, and you can get it kind of where it's even. There's a couple of natural hot springs on people's property up there that we were able to use, but you go a little farther up. We used to go up there rabbit hunting. We used to have these two 10-shot block clip 22s, Stevens 22s, and used to go up there, and the farmers used to pay us $1 a tail to kill these rabbits up there. Were poisoning. They were carrying these fleas that were poisoning the antelope up there. So they said, go out there and kill as many as you want. We'll give you $1 a piece for them. So we go do that. But there was at the time we were up there, it was like several months before we started doing that. There were accounts of they were finding animals, dozens and dozens of dogs that were beheaded, satanic symbols, ritual sites up around that area. Between the hot spring area, there's a little park where there's a hot spring area by the river. Between that and about another 10 miles up, between that and the Lake Oahe, there's these off roads, like logging roads and geological roads that we go down. And they found all these. There's a lot of Satanism going, a lot of ritual sacrifices of animals going on. It was really hush hush back in the day. But I remember, going up there and seeing a bunch of skeletons. They still had a bunch of skeletons all over the place.
Me too, man. Growing up in central Michigan, I had friends that were from Elma, Michigan, and there's a block that's actually been closed down, and from that block in the late '80s, someone was actually killing people, and they were being found back there, and they never, to this day, found out who committed those crimes. And I guess every town probably has its little urban legends that are based on reality. But I guess from how creepy that story is, that nothing had to be made up. You know what I mean? And
Oh
and
yeah,
that's
well,
the one thing that brought the whole story to mind for me. My little youthful story there. Urban legend story is that satanic symbols and things and whatnot were found at the abandoned building where some of the murders had taken place.
yeah. Well, I heard an account of these border patrol. Okay, I can't remember where it was, but these border patrol were doing their rounds. I think this was in uh, right there out of was it Texas? It was either Texas or one of those neighboring states. Well, they were driving and they seen a big bonfire, so they wanted to go check it out. It was right there over the border, and I can't give you the details. I'm sorry, but I do remember reading this account. And they came up on. They went around this corner, and there was a big bonfire, and there were all these robed figures around this bonfire, and they looked at them because they kind of creeped up to see what was going on, and somebody looked at them. They all started running towards the car. So these guys looked at each other, these two border patrol agents, and backed out of there and flipped around and split, man. Because what was, they just said it was the creepiest thing they ever experienced, and they were like scared. I mean, these guys were armed,
Stanley
and there had to have
Kubrick's
been
Eyes Wide
a
Shut in
dozen
the
people
middle
there.
of Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut in the middle of nowhere.
What was that now?
Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut in the middle of nowhere. It's a movie that depicts
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
satanic, satanistic rituals among the elitists and upper class. You know what I mean, in a culturistic
yeah.
type of
Well,
fashion.
that's a whole nother story there, and I believe there's really something to that, man. And if not, they're pretending it sure the hell is, you know.
Well, I have a video on my channel where actually at the end of the video, and the main focus is, and it's really a disgusting subject, and that's the future of society for us is just, you can't hide from these disgusting subjects. I mean, and hope they go away because they won't. But the whole idea is child prostitution, and it's even worse than that. That's a hard enough subject for most to even grasp or want to even hear discussed. But there's a commonality in the South, especially in Texas and Houston and the Dallas areas, where it's a white male boy prostitutes that are being murdered is the trend, and a lot of times they found that politicians have been involved in some of these situations, and not just not a lot of times in the murder aspect, but a lot of times with money for sex with these younger boys, and a lot of times they're able to get out of these situations with no repercussions, at least ones that are
Yeah,
like extremely light, like mandated therapy and
or
rehabilitation
they
for
can consider
alcohol.
justice when they resign. You
Or
know, that's ridiculous.
a lot of these gentlemen weren't even forced to be or forced to be resigned. But at the same time, this is an older video. I can't really comment on what's going on with these same situations. I doubt things really take place like they did back then, and it's probably due to light of this film, which is on my YouTube channel. And I think it's labeled something like "kid prostitutes being murdered in the United States," something as simple as that. And it's really rough. It's a really hard video to watch, and most people can't
Yeah.
make it past the first 10 minutes. And read the comments, people have stated that.
Well, here's the thing, man. You know how people they're so used. I mean, here's most people.
When
You
you
know.
talk about underground creatures, I guess this is some of the worst underground creatures we could bring up and discuss what we're
Oh
talking
yeah.
about right now.
Well, these really aren't. You know, politically correct. I don't think there's anything correct about politics. You know what I mean? I hear that term all the time. Politically correct. Politically, come on now. You know what I mean? Look what's going on. You know, most people aren't going to realize what's going on until it's to their front door.
Well, you know what they
You know.
say, war is politics by another means. And what's politics? It's basically just money talking.
Yeah, and what happens when you get too much money? Look, most of these career politicians and bureaucrats. Look at this. When you get too much money, you have everything. You've done everything. You can do everything you want. This is when you start twisting because you've done everything. So this is when you start getting twisted. They call it eccentricity. I call it perversion. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
That's what happens.
I'm right along
And
with you.
then they get caught up in they get these people that provide this stuff for them, then turn around and blackmail them. Now they have to sign on to this bill. Now they have to sign on to that bill. I mean, it's the way things are going. I mean,
It's
it's crazy,
actually
man.
funny that you mentioned that because this retired FBI agent, one of the last things he was able to do was he exposed a ring of actually pedophile um, people within the government that were actually being blackmailed on top of that. So there's even a more sinister element inside of the government that preys upon people that prey upon other people. Do you get what I'm saying? Like they're preying upon pedophiles, and
Yeah,
they're allowing
but
it
they're
to happen.
also
They
the ones
allow the
that
pedophilia to happen just so they can use that as leverage to get these same gentlemen to pass bills that favor them and their,
yeah,
their
exactly.
the outcomes that they
Exactly.
want.
They dangle the carrot, get their perversions and their inhibitions, and they do it, and I mean, that one. If you ever, I can't remember the name of the guy, but he was a male prostitute. That he was a madam of a in the '80s in Washington D.C. and he provided a lot of these male prostitutes to these. They'd have parties in these, these big mansions and whatnot, and he knew, and he came out with a book and said that
You're
I can't
talking
remember his name.
about
All
the
right, sorry about that.
boys. You're talking about the Boys Town scandal, right, Raven?
Yeah, well, yeah, he would come and they would record people. They would put video cameras, two-way mirrors, and record these politicians and these, you know, people doing the things, that they don't want anybody to know their wives and their,
And then they blackmailed him. And this was an African American gentleman, wasn't it?
No, this was a white guy. This was a white guy, and I'm sorry I don't remember his name, but there's a video out.
This has
I'll
happened
have to.
several times over. This has been exposed in various different ways, is what I'm
Yeah,
coming to
exactly.
find
And what
out the
happened?
more and
What
more
happened?
you
Swept
go
under the
on.
rug, forgot about.
Yeah, that's a common theme.
But yeah, exactly. I mean, just because you're in a position of power or authority does not make you any less human. I mean, humans, man. Here's the way I look at it. If it's physically possible and you can imagine it, a human has done it.
It's
And
a,
that's just the gist of it, man.
I agree with you, and it's at a certain point and at a certain level of privilege, people become out of touch with what the vast majority of people's what their reality actually is. You know what I mean? And most of these people
Yeah.
have never even experienced that reality to begin with, so of course they're out of touch. And so we look to these people to run our societies and our countries to our better benefit, and then we're surprised when they run it to their better benefit. And they're just doing exactly what we would do in the same position. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, you know what I mean? And it's like George Carlin always said, Raymond, you know what I mean? Where do these politicians come from? They're not sucked through, portals from some other dimension. They come from American homes, American cities, American institutions, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's sad to say, but maybe this is just the best we got. You know what I mean? And that's
Well,
it's
this
a
is the best we got, man. Yeah, I can't believe that. You know what I mean? The way I see it, this whole electoral process. What happened is Joe Blow down here at the bakery is a really intelligent guy. He has our best interest at heart. We're going to vote him in to represent us.
oh no for sure, but
He goes
it's
and does his time. He goes and does his time. He represents us the best he can. Tries to do what speak for us. And then when he's done with his time, he comes back and does his job.
what people have
And
to
then somebody else
realize.
goes in. That's the
Well,
way it's supposed to be. But you get these career politicians that spend their whole lives and become millionaires, and they get twisted in this corrupt politics, and it's just, man,
it's what people have
it
to
is so
realize,
crazy.
Raven. It's garbage in, garbage out, and you can't be surprised when the same system produces the same result time and time again.
Yeah, whether it doesn't matter what party it is, man. They're puppets. These guys. You know what I'm saying? They're puppets. These are just you know for show. The real power is the corporations. The real power is the world banks. You know what I'm saying? The elitists, and that's the fact. I mean,
Every
you
year,
just
the big wigs are fighting over whether to disclose who is paying for all these lobbyists and who is paying all these large donations to campaigns for politicians, and they don't want people to know because these are the real people that are running our country. These people that are paying for these politicians' campaigns.
yeah. What is it? The Koch brothers? You heard of them?
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Come on. If you donate $900 million to somebody's campaign, you're going to want something in return if you get elected,
And
and
I
that's all there
believe,
is to it.
I believe Coca-Cola just in the last year or two was in the news. Coca-Cola headline: got caught putting drugs in their Coca-Cola pop again. And that's a really wonderful thing to give to your kids is a Coca-Cola soda pop.
Man, it's unreal. It is totally unreal. If you stood back and really just look at the big picture. I mean, even since like we discussed one time, if you look at 1980 till now and look at everything that we have lost, look at the morality that has fallen. So, I mean, the acceptance of the things that are going on. It's like a different world, for real. Not I'm not talking about just technology and the advancements we've come.
Not to
I'm
lighten
talking
the
about
not to
people's
lighten the
acceptance
situation
of
at
what
all,
is
Raven.
acceptable.
Not to lighten the situation at all, but you know what's unreal? That seal alien life form that Mel said that he found at the second hole that actually
Yeah,
supposedly cured his cancer.
yeah, exactly. But do we have any? That's just crazy. I mean,
And we
it sounds
actually
crazy
don't.
to me. It really does. But do you think that's something that was supposed to be? Was it supposed to sound that way?
Well, here's the thing
I
too:
just
is it's not been documented that he actually had cancer to need to be cured from to begin with.
yeah, exactly. We don't know that.
When you
It just
Google,
sounded to me when he was talking about that he sounded really feverish and really like he sounded like he was being coerced to me.
the first
You know?
time, the first time he was pretty blunt, just a simple guy, and
Yeah,
it didn't
exactly.
seem too outlandish, honestly, the way he described everything. And when you search for Mel's Hole on the net, well, the first thing you find is Wikipedia thing where they say that it's undocumented that Mel Waters even existed. But
Exactly.
anyway, you also find news stories where they say that he did. Where reporters had went out and researched him. So there is a campaign to provide disinformation. Which way? That's up to you, the viewers out there, to decide for
Yeah.
yourself. Because my
Well,
personal
I'm here to
opinion
tell you.
is the
I'm
first
here to tell you
hole.
that's the story about the hole, and it's true. I'm not saying all the crazy stuff after that, after the fact, after the military took over, after all that.
Now you're talking about the
I,
first hole, not the
I'm talking
second
about the
hole.
first hole. I'm talking about the reason, the main reason he wanted to get this on the radio is because he wanted to see if it was the deepest hole, in the world or ever recorded, and he wanted to get in the book of Guinness, Guinness Book of World Records, and that was a simple enough thing. It just got so blown out of proportion and just turned into a really crazy, outlandish story later. But that's after all this stuff happened to him. And I just think that there's something more to that. I think that he had to do it that way for his own safety, maybe. That's my opinion. It is just a theory, but it just doesn't compute. All of a sudden, he has these wild. We can't say that's not true, but it's just so outlandish. I tend to think I would believe more of the fact that they told him you need to make up this. Somebody got to him and said, you know what, you need to. I want you to be debunked. You could have to say all these crazy stuff, so people will say, oh, that's just crazy.
I do know one
To
thing,
me,
Raven. Next time I buy a pistol that's the same make and model as the one that Mel described on the Art Bell radio show, I will be putting it next to my radio to see if I can tune in frequencies from the past or the future.
yeah, but I think he was talking about more along the lines of it being contaminated with some sort of maybe electromagnetic field or something out of a who knows. The insinuation to me was it was contaminated with some kind of dimensional portal residue or something. I'm not sure. But the whole dime thing too with what was it, Roosevelt? Who was on it?
Now, I know I don't remember hearing exactly what it is that you're talking about now.
Well, he found a dime. He found a envelope. It was like one of those
Oh,
little red envelopes
and it
that
seemed like the coin was from a reality that never existed, where someone was a
exactly
president at
like
an
an
individual
alternate
time.
reality, and they
Yes.
were dimes with they were regular dimes with like either Roosevelt. There was a president on there that wasn't didn't exist. I can't remember the exact detail about that, but this was the crazy part of the story. And there was 10 dimes. He said there was 10 in there, and he made some belt buckles out of those dimes with other silver spoons and other stuff been around and some other uh, nickels and whatnot, and he sold a few of them. And those, as far as I know, he did sell some butt buckles. He did make some stuff like that and sell them around town.
It would be
but I've never
interesting to
seen
come
one,
across some
and
of those Mel's relics.
yeah, exactly. It'd be nice to try to contact some of my friends or family down there and find out if they knew anybody who ever bought one.
There was an art
That would be,
conference where people, I think it was 40 different people came and submitted different art designs of Mel's holes that they had created based upon the radio show. It's very
mhm.
interesting.
Now here's one aspect that to think about. Now, when Mel first did the interview, it was a basic guy found that he had this hole out there. He just wanted hey, I was putting line down it, and whoa, I can't find the bottom. Man, I should contact somebody about it. Okay, so if the story was so amazing, you know, all the way up into including the second hole, wouldn't that be something that he put in there to start with?
You would
You,
think
you know what I mean?
so. You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, wouldn't you think he would put the dimes that he found out there and all that stuff in there, uh, to begin with? I mean, the second hole came later. I understand that, but I'm talking about the most important aspect of the whole story. It's mundane, pretty much, or just kind of amazing. There's a big deep hole. People have been throwing stuff
Yeah,
in.
you're right. It
But
went from I like to throw TV tubes down a hole to I found a metal hole and there's a seal that came out of a tumor that birthed out of a tumor, and then there's a bird flying around that can't be shot and killed. And the stories got almost beyond believable. And then there's a tribe of Basques where I actually have Basque ancestry myself, and
yeah,
there's no convoluted tribe of bass guarding some hole in the desert that I would naturally assume. You know what I mean, common sense wise, and with Native Americans too. It is hard to swallow. I'm not saying it's not possible that it's accurate, but
yeah.
it's definitely out there. It's definitely an
Well,
out there
I can't.
tale.
Do you remember? Do you remember whether or not he said when he found them dimes in that like Chinese envelope, some kind of Asian envelope that he said something about it being of Chinese design. The envelope they found 10 dimes in there. Do you recall whether or not he said that they had a different head on them, or do than the
Here's the
normal,
problem, Raven, is that
or does that come later?
I've caught most of the old recordings of the Art Bell shows, but there's a couple in the series that I missed out on, and um, yeah, and unfortunately, I don't think I've heard that particular episode.
Yeah, well, it was part of the same story, so you must have missed it. But he found, supposedly on his property, this is before they took the property, he found 10 dimes. And I don't remember whether or not he said that these dimes, that he recognized that the dimes had Roosevelt on them instead of a different president. I can't remember what the actual president was. Was it was it Kennedy? I don't remember. I
I,
don't
be-
remember what's on the dang dime.
I believe it was
Um,
Theodore Roosevelt.
on the dime?
I thought so, but at a weird year, like when he had ran and lost the first time he had won.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah. There was something to do with it. Was. I can't remember the year, but man, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared for that. I thought you already had that information, but
Oh, I
to me,
apologize, buddy. That
seemed
was
like
one
it
piece of
seemed like he didn't
information.
notice the dimes had that on there until after all the stuff, until the second hole.
All I remember hearing about the money currency is that the currency itself insinuated that it had came from an alternate reality based upon what was
Yeah,
depicted on the coin.
yeah, yeah. And he never could. And when he asked if he could send a picture of it, he said he couldn't do it because of some he didn't have a camera to do it. The camera wouldn't do it or some shit.
And when
But
he was knocked out in between holes, when he was knocked out and found in an alley and whatnot after he had lost his land and all of his money, according to Mel, that
they took the buckle.
the belt buckle, which had been made of the coins and other gems he had found on the land, had been snatched from him forever, with
Yeah,
no
exactly.
proof
So
remaining
there
for
went
him.
his proof. But at the end of this whole thing, you remember he said he was talking to one of the Basque elders, And the Basque elder gave him a dime, and he says at the end of this whole thing, he said that he had a dime. He still had it. That the elder had given it to him. Do you remember that?
I do not remember that part of the story.
Yeah, this is at the end of all of it. It was like an ending to a good story to me, But it just seemed crazy. But he does supposedly supposed to, as of now, was supposed to have that dime.
It does make you wonder if someone actually had been lowered into the hole, what they would find down there, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you got to think about it too. If it's that deep and it never filled up, I mean, look, it'd be so crazy. People could just get rid of somebody down there.
It's been brought up to question before that Bigfoot could possibly be an underground dweller, that aliens could be underground, that there could be an entrance to Hollow Earth. I mean, the explanations for the hole would go on and on and on. Wouldn't you say so, Raven? Have you heard of any other different explanations yourself?
Well, yeah. You got to think about it. Ellensburg is right on a ley line. You know what I mean?
Very
As
interesting.
far
Okay.
as far as I can tell, you look at the grid of the ley lines and you look down. Ellensburg's right on one of those. And supposedly, when you get these lines, here's the research I've done. You get these electromagnetic field lines, ley lines, so to speak, and you get the thick ones, the ones they're powerful, and then you get when they get close to a weak one, it kind of thins out. It sucks in a little bit of that. This is the way I understand it. It weakens the thin one even more, and it kind of creates a breach in our reality or dimension, and things can leak through. So who's to know? I mean, it's all theoretical, but it is one theory that these ley lines at certain points can open up rifts,
Yeah,
and who knows? I
whether
mean,
it's accurate or not, people who do design the layouts for cities are building specific things on these ley lines, and whether it's accurate or not, they do find it beneficial to themselves to do so because they are doing this. You know what I mean?
yeah. Well, now getting back into what you want to get into the experiments on. I think there's something to this, like cloaking, invisibility. Some type of I've heard that people say the Bigfoot and some even military can bend light around them to where
Oh,
they're invisible or
it's a
they're
fact.
they're
I mean, on the History Channel several years back, I remember watching a documentary where they showed the chameleon body armor suit, where that's exactly how it worked. It bended light around it. The material of the suit was electronic and powered up like an LCD monitor in a way. Kind of, it's hard to describe how it worked, but it bended light around it to where it made the person almost invisible.
yeah. But there's also the paranormal aspect, the where you have some type of paranormal uh, phenomena going on that's a natural. It's not natural, but it's a natural occurrence with the Bigfoot. I've heard that they are like, one theory is that they're interdimensional. They can zip in and out. You know what I mean?
Oh, and
But I
I've
also
heard
heard that they can run like they can run like they're almost a different uh, density. You know what I mean? They're super fast running up a hill, even though with their bulk, they can climb up trees, sit on little branches. It's almost like they can diminish their physical being.
I've also heard a new
Uh,
theory that Bigfoot could be some type of evolved sloth of some type, and that the sloth can take up to 14 days to digest its food from one meal, which could explain why it was hard to find its excrement. And another thing is the sloth's testicles are internal. And I mean, I've never heard any stories about anyone seeing Bigfoot's balls or anything.
yeah, no kid. That would be a different. Like they'd coin a different name there, huh?
Bigfoot's balls,
Well,
yeah.
another thing about you've heard of the Montauk Project, right?
No, actually, I'm not currently familiar.
Okay, well, Long Island, New York, it's on Montauk Point. It's claimed to be It was claimed to be abandoned in 1969, and it was used as a public park. That is above the ground, you know. And what lies beneath the research are research scientists' facilities, and nobody knows how many there are or what they're working on. But the locals have claimed to have seen orbs and strange lights originating from the location. Preston Nichols wrote a book documenting invisibility experiments, time travel manipulation projects, and his book is called The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time. And it was published in 1992. So anybody wants to look into that, they can check that out. Probably the library or go online and check that out. But it was quite interesting. You know, we're talking about natural occurrences of, or you know, other dimensional portals and whatnot. You know, I believe there's so much. There's so much going on. We can only perceive what our senses allow us. But if there's another creature out there or some other being that can perceive differently than us or from a different time, you know, I hear that there are theories out there that they can see us, but we can't see them.
There's
You know what
so
I mean?
many vast subjects out there. Even with all the time in the world, we're barely going to be able to ever scratch the surface out there on pretty much most topics there is worthy of discussion, Raven. And the one thing that I always will remember that my father told me growing up, the older I get, the more I realize the less I know. And I could actually, you do learn more as you go with certain conspiratorial topics, the more research you go. But you do realize that the further that you do go down the wormhole, the more complicated things get.
Exactly, because you know your the experience. You know, some of the stuff that I've seen and went through. Man, you know, I mean, I've experienced a few things that could be not explained by physical, normal physics, and you know, you got to be something other than terrestrial. You
And
know.
I agree. I mean, not necessarily in the same factoid, but I have experienced things where you could quote unquote maybe say that it's government harassment, and it's not for sure that it is, and that's just how they work too, in that kind of shadowy type of way, to where you could not realize, hey, is it coincidental? Did my computer in the middle of making my controversial videos get virus infected by some of the most recent and nastiest viruses? When we pretty
Mm-hmm.
much know for a fact that most nasty viruses are written by our governments to begin with, and
Yeah.
it's but who knows? These are all coincidences. You know what I mean? In my personal life, you know what I mean? Who knows? Maybe they are
Mm-hmm.
just coincidences.
Well, if you look back in the archives, you know, I used to live in Wenatchee, and I used to go to this festival they used to have every year called the Wenatchee Apple Blossom, and it's a big deal. You know, they have a carnival there, and there's a lot of people celebrate the blossoming, you know, the blossoms. And I believe it was back in God, it had to be 80s. Yeah, it's probably 82, somewhere around there. Well, there's a outside of Wenatchee. There's a little town called Rock Island, and you can look it up. It used to have a little right outside of Rock Island, right there. It's next to the river. Um, a little farther down, there's a pond. It's kind of an offshoot of the river. That's a little farther over, but there used to be this giant raft, a wooden raft on the middle of this place that was kind of anchored down out there. We'd swim out to it and get on one side, it'd flip down, we'd jump off one end and all that and have fun with it. Well, I was probably about 12 years old, and I remember coming back. You know, we got out of the water, we jumped in the old station wagon we was in, and we started taking off. And all these cars were pulled over on the side of the road, including a cop, and there's a couple business cars. Just all the cars were pulled over. I'm like, oh great, a wreck. You know, everybody's thinking, a wreck, and I was looking out the window, and people were outside of their car looking up. You know, probably, a little above, probably, just straight ahead up to a cloud, probably over the mountains a little bit. Um, they were looking up at something, and some people had binoculars, some people had cameras, and so we got out. What the heck are they looking at? We looked up there, and there's this. I'm telling you, it was a spherical shaped gray. It looked like the front. Honestly, it looked like the front end of a blimp. Okay, kind of. But it wasn't a blimp. It was like between two clouds, and it just sat there. It didn't turn. It moved. It didn't do nothing. And everybody, and I'm sitting here witnessing this, and this on my life, I'm telling you the truth here. I'm not making this up. I mean, it was in the papers. Around this time, there were a lot of front page the Wenatchee Herald. There was a lot of front page pictures of these lights in the sky. But anyway, we're watching this, and one of the people we were with is, I can't remember his name. He had a dog named, I can't remember. He had a big Saint Bernard that was with us, and anyway, he was trying to hold that dog, and he was getting his binoculars out of the car, and we're looking at it. It looks metallic, and it was like a metallic gray. And as we're all watching it, the only way I can explain it, the clouds had moved away from it, and it just sat there, and it disappeared. But you know how you watch a bubble? If you pop a bubble, you see the flash of all the liquid disappearing. Just kind of a flash.
Okay.
That's what it looked like. It disappeared, but it looked like it looked like it was a bubble that popped. It flashed like there was, on all around it, it looked like a splash of light, or water or something, just like a popped bubble.
Boy, I hate to sound like a government agent, but you sure you didn't see a weather balloon? It kind of describes
Nope, it
like
was not a weather balloon. It disappeared. It sat there, and it was huge. This thing had to be as big as it. Let me see.
and we're
The top of
talking
the Space
about
Needle. It was about as big as the top of the Space Needle, looking down on the
we're
Space Needle.
talking about this was back in the day before drones and remote control drones of the such.
Yeah, this was not, and I can tell you, all the accounts, there was nothing there, nothing in the air. Nobody ever seen anything. There was no balloons. There was no. It was in the newspaper. All the people that were sitting there, we all were looking at you like, "Whoa, did you see that?" And there's like 20 people on the side of the road. All the cars pulled over. I'm telling you, it was not a balloon. It was not a blimp. It was something metallic sitting in the air that was completely round, and it just looked like it just popped. And it was huge. It was just the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And everybody around there, we stood there talking to each other. People walking up. Did you see that? You got pictures of it? And just blah blah blah. People, nobody had cell phones back then, so I mean, people were like, "Hey," I think maybe somebody had one of those big giant flip ones. They were calling somebody.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
it's wild, man. Something I've always wanted to do was see a UFO, and of course the
And
other
that's the
night,
truth. I mean,
my
I'm not
friends.
making that. I have no reason to make that up, and I'm not. I'm telling you, I've only told a few people that, but I'm telling you, there were dozens of witnesses. And during that time, at night, my grandfather seen some stuff too. We were out at the lake or at the river, and a bunch of other people. There was video, there's pictures. It was in the front page of the Wenatchee Herald. People were looking up, and they were like, all of a sudden, these 7 lights, one big bright one and 6 smaller ones. Way up there, all zipped down from somewhere, and the 6 lights were rotating around the center big light, and then they all went together into the big light, and then one by one, these little ones zipped off and disappeared, and then the big bright one took off and disappeared. And this was like going on for like 10, 15 minutes. And that was in the newspapers, and yeah, they had video of that and all kinds of stuff. If you look up Wenatchee, UFO sightings, man. It was no joke. There are hundreds and hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, seen that.
Wow. Yeah,
And
my friends
yeah,
just recently, and it took me forever to get a video from them. And of course, the friend that was most willing to give me a video, because several of them that evening made videos, had the worst cell phone of all of them. He brought me a copy of the video, and it really doesn't do it justice because you can't see it darting back and forth. But from what I heard is here locally in central Michigan, these friends of mine were out back of one of their parents' houses having a bonfire, just like a small group of 5 to 10 people, and off within 50 to 100 yards away, above a tree line, they saw this image, and you can see it in the video. It's my newest upload on Fritz Vids, and you can see the object darting back and forth and going to what looks like eighth of a mile away, up and then back down to the tree line, and it's the movements of it. It's hard to explain what that is, to be honest with you. Even though it's
Yeah.
extremely dark and it's very poor video quality, and I don't blame you guys for any scrutiny of what of the sort of or whatnot. But these are people I do know, and the caliber and level of their intelligence, no insulting them is intended at all, but I don't ever see them faking this, or at least in a believable way, as such that they have, if
Yeah.
they did.
Well, they
Honestly.
obviously believed what they saw was something other than a natural phenomena, like a plane or a star or a satellite.
We're talking about
I could,
guys who are having a hard time scramble off enough beer money and cigarette money for the weekend, much less do they have money to go pay for some expensive drone to. And the movements of how fast of a distance it's covering, I don't even think it could be mimicked by a drone. Whatever
yeah,
this is.
that's weird. That is. I've seen that video. I watched it. I could barely see it when I was looking at it from my Android phone. So
It's horrible.
I'll
Oh
probably look
yeah,
at it
you
again
have
with
to be
my
on a
laptop.
computer to even be able to come close, and you have to click the tab on YouTube and turn it up to 720p.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry about that
Raven,
beeping noise.
it's getting late here, my man. And
Yeah.
it's
It
been
is.
another good show, and I've enjoyed it and had a great time. I want to let everybody know that if you want to leave a comment, if you want us to answer your question in the next show we do, leave a comment here on this one pertaining to anything we talked about this evening. Maybe leave a comment about anything you would like us to talk about in the future.
Absolutely. And there's lots of things out there that I can do research on that I know about. There's a few other things that we didn't get time to get to, but you know, we do good research. I mean, and a man once said, I can't remember who exactly it was, but he said, "Watch everything, listen to everything, read everything, but don't believe a word of it until you do your own research."
And that is a very great advice, my friend. And thank you again, Raven, for joining me again. And thank you for all you YouTube people out there in YouTube world for watching this show. I hope you enjoyed it, and we plan to make more in the future. And Raven, stay put for a little after the show convo. And thanks again, guys. And have a nice middle of the morning, because that's when most of you guys watch. Bye
Okay,
bye.
good night.